What is the difference from your perspective between enablement and readiness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of see this as like a hot take at times, but I do feel like this is becoming more and more accepted. Enablement in and of itself is such a young function, right? This isn't something that if you look back to a revenue organization 20 years ago, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that was enablement, right? It started to really blossom over the past 10 to 15 years. So it is a relatively new function. And as it started to evolve, I think people are starting to differentiate the kind of craft within there, right? The enablement is the kind of overall function, but within that is where readiness lives. So when you think about enablement, we're going to be thinking about the content and tools to make people successful as sellers, right? Or as revenue generating employees. It's really kind of like a whole rev org function. I'm thinking about from, all the way at the beginning of pre-sales to renewal, like how are we thinking about how the content and tools that are needed for those people to be successful. Big focus on change management, big focus on internal comms. There's going to be collaboration between product marketing and the enablement practitioners and revenue leaders. Like it's really kind of all hands on deck with the idea there's the hope to drive effectiveness. Like that's revenue effectiveness is really what they're looking for of results and productivity. Where on the other hand, readiness is kind of a slice inside of enablement where it's like taking all of those content and tools and then saying, how are we doing this with real world application? How are we actually putting this into practice? What does that look like? It's a much more focused approach. We're thinking about things like assessments and training and coaching, skill development. And so what this looks like when I'm thinking about the end results is reps are prepared, they're efficient, and there's kind of a standard of excellence, right, that you're looking for from a coaching culture. And this kind of leans more into the actual enablement team itself, but then also revenue leaders. So that's kind of, it's like product marketing's kind of done their piece, right? They've handed off the content that needs to be used. And now this is more from a overall philosophy standpoint, and then also how it leads into execution from a revenue leader. And so I think it's really important to understand that there's different components of sales readiness. And I would say I'll break it down into three. I think you could argue there would be a fourth, but product knowledge, process knowledge, and skills development, with that fourth possibly being like industry knowledge. I would lump that into product knowledge as like part of the overall ICP. But I think what happens in a lot of organizations is that people get caught in the product and process never ending wheel. Like there is always something happening within an organization to address from hey, we've got this new feature, or we've got this opportunity to sell as a suite instead of just a single product, right? So a lot of opportunity for people to learn about what their products and services are actually offered by their organization. So that's kind of a consistent development in tech, especially. And then there's process knowledge, which the RevOps team is really going to care about, right? Did you fill out the appropriate fields in Salesforce or HubSpot? And have you looked at your forecast and, the actual process of getting their job done? And so I think that there's a lot that goes into that to make sure that an organization can forecast appropriately, look at churn appropriately. Like all of these things are really important for people to know and adhere to. So definitely a top-down approach of making sure people have the process knowledge. And sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is because of the consistent demand in those two areas, there just isn't enough time to get to skills development. And so either skills development is kind of like a flavor within the overall meal of a product and process training, right? But there's maybe not time to pull somebody aside and work very specifically on a place they're either excelling and allows them to move into the next tier of their role, or that they're struggling and it's causing performance issues. But I think people who are in enablement roles, or people who care about enablement within a revenue organization, generally get there because they care deeply about the success of the people in those roles, right? I don't think anybody really heads into that role with I really want to just build content all day, or some people are very excited about instructional design, and that's great, but always with the end goal of the learner in mind, right? So the people that head into these roles really care about the development of the people they're serving inside the organization. So skill development tends to be the thing that when I've worked with enablement practitioners in the past, it's like the aspirational place to be. Like, yes, we really care about skills and we want to make sure we get there. It's just like, that's our next hire, or that's our next initiative, or, it's like on the docket, but unfortunately always just gets deprioritized amongst all the other things that they're responsible for delivering to the business.